everyone! Today we're going to be making this very simple recycled cotton yarn beanie. And for this beanie, I am working with some size 3 lightweight yarn, and these are all the Diva brand's recycled cotton. I'm also going to be working with a size G or 6 or 4 1/4 millimeter crochet hook. And you will also need 2 safety pins or stitch markers for this. And this beanie does have a precursor video, and that is my how to crochet a chevron brim, which I will link to in the description as well as right here. And I crocheted a total of 43 of my chevron stitches here. So once you have your 43 chevron stitches in place, then you're going to fold your brim in half so that the pretty side is facing in and the ugly side is facing out. And before we close up our brim, make sure that you have placed a row of single crochets after your last chevron stitch, and this should put your crochet hook on the opposite side of your starting tail when you fold this in half. You also want to make sure you've placed your chain 1 at the end of your row. So now we're going to join these 2 edges using slip stitches. So to do that, we're going to insert our crochet hook up underneath the full stitch all the way over on our working yarn side, just like this. So you should have 5 loops on your crochet hook, and you're going to yarn over and pull through all of the loops on your crochet hook for a slip stitch. From here, we're just going to repeat that process going up our row for a total of 7 slip stitches. And the only weird part about this joining is in your middle stitch here where you placed your chevron stitch in that front loop, you will only have 1 loop to work in. So don't get frustrated if you can't find the second loop there. And once you're done joining your 2 edges, it should look something like this. So we're just going to cut and tie off our yarn. And we're going to turn our brim right side out. From here, we're going to be working along the top edge of our brim. And what we want to do is insert our crochet hook right here. Next, we're going to grab our next color and yarn over with it. And you're going to want to hold your tail in place while you place a chain 2. From here, you can work over your starting and ending tails, but before you do so, I do recommend tying this starting blue tail to your other 2 tails. From here, diving right back into the same loop where we just inserted our crochet hook, we're going to place a double crochet. Again, you can crochet over all of these tails at once if you would like. And if you look in the top portion of each of your chevron stitches, you should see 2 loops that sort of look like a stitch. For the brim, we want to place 2 double crochets in each of these sets of 2 loops going all the way around. And again, you can work over your tails if you would like. So go ahead and repeat this pattern going all the way around your row, and you should have 90 double crochets, including that chain 2, when you get to the end of your row. And at the end of your row, your pattern should look something like this. So from here, we want to place a slip stitch in the top of our first double crochet. Then we want to pull our loop out nice and long and remove our crochet hook. Then we want to slide our safety pin or stitch marker inside of the loop. And this locks it so that you can't accidentally start to pull out your stitches. So now we're going to reinsert our crochet hook in the first double crochet where we've already placed our slip stitch. And we want to yarn over and pull up through with our next color. And again, you want to hold your tail while you place your first stitch. So the pattern for this row is going to be to alternate between placing front and back post stitches. And we're going to start right here in our current stitch where we've already placed our slip stitch. So to place a front post stitch, you're going to yarn over, and then I want you to insert your crochet hook in the gap between your chain 2 and your first double crochet, just like this. Then you're going to pull your crochet hook back around between your first and second double crochets. And you should have captured the stem or the post of your double crochet. From here, we're going to yarn over and pull up through our post, and then yarn over and drop 2 loops at a time until we complete our stitch. So now we want to place a back post stitch around our next double crochet. So to do that, yarn over, and we're going to insert our crochet hook between our double crochet stitches from behind like this. Then we're going to push our crochet hook back to the back, hooking around the front of our crochet hook instead of the back. And it might be helpful to look at the back of your project while you finish out your stitch. So you're going to yarn over and pull up through your post. Then you're going to yarn over and drop 2 loops at a time until you complete your back post stitch. So now we're just going to place a front post stitch around our next stitch, inserting our crochet hook from the front for the front post stitch. Then again, alternating our stitches, we're going to work a back post stitch in our next stitch. So go ahead and alternate between placing front and back post stitches going all the way around your row, and I'll meet back up with you at the end of the row. And you should end your row on a front post stitch, but before we close up this row, I want you to place a back post stitch around your chain 2. And this should be at the beginning of your row. So we're just going to capture our chain 2 just like we did our double crochets. We're going to finish up with a back post stitch. And we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first front post stitch here. Then we're going to reinsert our crochet hook in our little blue loop here, and then insert our safety pin in our yellow loop. And for our next row, we're going to chain 1. And we're going to work right here in this first front post stitch from our previous row. And basically we want to place opposite stitches. So in every stitch where you placed a front post stitch, you're now going to place a back post stitch. And in every back post stitch, you're going to place a front post stitch. And when you're placing these stitches, you want to make sure you're working around the stem or the post that forms our stitch, just like you did for your double crochets. So again, we're just going to place opposite stitches. And one thing to note, make sure you haven't accidentally trapped your working yarn from your previous color. Basically, just by accidentally capturing it in your first stitch will make it to where you have to pull this through that first stitch for the rest of your project, and you don't want to do that. So just quickly make sure that this working yarn is free. So go ahead and continue to place your opposite stitches, and I will meet back up with you at the end of your row. And when you get to the end of your row, we're just going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first back post stitch right here. And we're going to put our other safety pin in this blue loop. So now we want to attach our third color to our crochet hook using a slip knot. And we're going to dive right into placing our post stitches. So while you place your first front post stitch, you might want to hold on to your tail. So we're just going to yarn over and insert our crochet hook right here around that first back post stitch. And again, we're just placing opposite stitches, so we're going to place a front post stitch here. And for this row, we're just going to place opposite stitches again. So in every front post stitch, we're going to place a back post stitch. And in every back post stitch, we're going to place a front post. And at the end of your row, you're going to slip stitch into the top of your first front post stitch. So as far as the color pattern goes, I am going to place a blue colored row in between each of my rows. So my next row will be blue and then the following row will be yellow. And when it comes to changing out your colors, you're just going to want to place one chain stitch for each row that you're skipping. So when you're placing your blue colored rows, you're just going to place one chain. But when you're placing your terracotta or yellow colored rows, you're going to place 3 chains. So we're just going to repeat this pattern of placing opposite stitches and changing out our colors until we've built the body of our beanie. I went ahead and crocheted 21 of my front and back post stitches. So to begin to close the gap in the top of your beanie, go ahead and grab your next color and we're just going to switch it out with our safety pin like we've been doing. And we're going to chain 3 just like we've been doing for all of our seam transitions. And basically for this row, we're going to crochet 2 post stitches together at a time. So I'm going to start right here in this back post stitch, and I'm going to yarn over and start to work a front post stitch in this. And so basically that's just going to consist of yarning over and pulling up through my post so that I have my 3 loops on my crochet hook. From here, I'm going to yarn over and begin to place a back post stitch in this next stitch. Again, we're only going to get to the part where we yarn over and pull up through. From here, you should have 5 loops on your crochet hook. So we're going to yarn over and drop 3 loops, and then yarn over and drop 3 loops again to complete our decreasing stitch. So now we're just going to repeat that process of placing our decreasing post stitches in every stitch going around our row. So when we get to the end of our row, we should have a total of 45 post stitches. And at the end of your row, you want to place a slip stitch in the top of your first post stitch, just like all of the other rows. And from here, we want to trade out for our blue color yarn. And again, we're going to chain 1. So for this row, we're going to place a regular back post stitch in our very first stitch. And then from here, we just want to repeat our last row, placing our decreasing post stitches going all the way around our row. And when we get done, we should have a total of 23 stitches. And just like all the other rows, when you get to the end of this row, you're just going to slip stitch into the top of your first post stitch. And we're going to trade out our crochet hook and our safety pin. And we're going to chain 3. And we're just going to place these decreasing post stitches going all the way around our row, starting with that first stitch. And I placed a front post stitch in my very last stitch of this row because we had an odd number of stitches. From here, we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first decreasing post stitch, and then we're going to cut and tie off our yarn. And we're also going to go ahead and cut and tie off our yellow color as well. And we're going to go ahead and slide our crochet hook in our blue color. And we're going to place our chain 1, and we're going to place a back post stitch around our first stitch here, and then we're just going to place our decreasing post stitches going around our row. And so at the end of your row, you're just going to place a slip stitch in the top of your first post stitch. And working on the opposite edge of this tiny hole at the top, I'm just going to place a few slip stitches to close the gap here. And once you've closed up the hole at the top of your beanie, then you can cut and tie off your yarn. And I am going to draw my tail to the inside of my beanie and hide it there. Thank you so much for working with me, and I hope you have a wonderful, awesome day.